I have not been on many roller coasters, 25 to be exact, but that number will change by the end of the year. I took account of all the coasters that I could possibly ride this summer, and I counted a total of 48 new credits, almost tripling my credit count. In this video, I will be highlighting the top 15 of these based on my excitement for them. This does not mean this list will be how I think I would rank them, but that does come into play a little bit. There will be some examples that are especially prevalent. Without further ado, let's get into the ranking. Starting off this list is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. I know this might be very low, but I've already ridden a coaster like this, Renegade at Valleyfair. Nevertheless, this looks like an awesome ride filled with great airtime pops and quick lateral turns. It seems to be a better version of Renegade, but with an out and back layout. It goes out into the woods a little more and is apparently really smooth, even for a wooden coaster. Despite its place here, it still looks to be the best wooden coaster on this list. At the number 14 spot is Maverick at Cedar Point. This ride seems to be the only one I could ride this year that will rival Incredible Hulk in intensity. This ride has incredibly snappy elements with strong looking ejector airtime moments. Those inversions seem to be the highlight of the ride for me, with how they just keep your body pinned to the side of the train while your butt is out of your seat. It's just not higher on this list because I've already ridden an Intamin Blitz and Velocicoaster. However, Maverick isn't last on this list because of how different it is from Velocicoaster. At number 13, we have Monster at Adventureland. To me, this seems like it's a bigger version of something like SpongeBob SquarePants Rock Bottom Plunge at the Mall of America. However, those funky elements are not something I've seen in person on a roller coaster. That finish loop in particular is very intriguing to me. It looks like a loop just turned into a stall. That's not to say that the whole ride is normal. The first element and many others look like they were just made on purpose to give you the weirdest combination of forces. The main reason it's a little higher on this list is because I've never been on a coaster in which its main draw is hang time. Going into number 12 is Raptor at Cedar Point. I've never been on a B&M invert, but I do kinda know what to expect from it, being on Mindy Racer. With that, I'm still extremely excited for this ride. It looks to be as snappy as Maverick, but more focused on inversions instead of high-speed turns. Spoiler alert, Banshee at Kings Island is not on this list, but this ride is because of how intense and snappy it seems to be. I was showing my dad a POV of this ride a while ago, which was the first time I saw the POV, and when I saw those almost flat corkscrew, I was like, God damn, what am I getting myself into? Those, to me, look to be my favorite parts of that already amazing ride. Coming into number 11 is the Beast at Kings Island. For me, the main reason it's so high is because of its legendary reputation. It looks like it'll pull forces like a family coaster, but that doesn't matter. I'm excited for the long ride provided by those two lift hills and its very secluded setting out in the woods. The main draw with this ride is all the charm it holds. Not being the most intense, I wouldn't even mind if it was a rough ride. However, I can see this possibly being a sleeper hit of my trip this year. Starting off the top 10 is Shivering Timbers at Michigan's Adventure. This coaster strikes me as a very interesting ride. It's a Monster CCI wooden coaster with the layout of a B&M Hyper coaster at the most neglected park in the Cedar Fair chain. With that said, it also seems to run like a B&M Hyper by giving airtime on every hill. This is up a little higher because I've never been on a wooden coaster that has airtime hills after airtime hills. This ride seems to be everywhere in people's top 50 lists, but the fact is that it's consistently in their top 50 lists. It's that consistency that puts Shivering Timbers on this list. Continuing into the 9th spot is Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point. Like Shivering Timbers, this ride is known for giving lots of airtime. The only difference is that Magnum gives sloppy ejector airtime. That's what elevates my excitement for this ride. This ride seems to be the opposite of Wild Thing, in which it gives airtime in the second half and not the first. I'm unfortunately not seeing any airtime on the first couple of hills, but the return run more than makes up for it by very likely giving some of the strongest airtime moments I'll ever experience. Overall, I see this as being a stronger, jankier, and most importantly, better version of Wild Thing. At the number 8 spot, we have Diamondback at Kings Island. Before you hate on me, I will say that I've never been on anything like a B&M Hyper before. You could say Wild Thing, but I don't count it. Unlike Wild Thing and Magnum, this ride seems to give consistent floater airtime throughout the whole ride. It's also not really a traditional hypercoaster following more of a twister-like layout, and I've never been on any hyper besides Wild Thing, which follows a more out-and-back layout. The staggered seating on this ride is particularly intriguing to me because it looks like I could get borderline ejector airtime sitting in the very back row. So I'm going to make that a priority if I get to Kings Island. Before I continue with the ranking, I will state that the roller coasters ahead have almost no similarity to any roller coasters I've ever ridden as of this video's release. So it's kind of hard to judge what experience I think I'll have. In 7th place is Valravn at Cedar Point. There's so much about this ride that's intriguing to me. When you're being held over the first drop, you'll get great views of the park all around you. That sustained vertical drop at that scale looks like it should give great airtime. I've only experienced one vertical drop before, but that was less than half the height of this ride. The rest of the layout may not particularly be the most exciting, but I'm still looking forward to the great hang time I'm going to get. Besides, the main draw with Valravn and all other dive coasters are the first drops. It's just not higher because those vest restraints may or may not take away the ride experience from me. Just missing the top 5 is Gatekeeper at Cedar Point. The main reason I have this higher than Valravn is that this ride seems to execute its concept a little bit better. I've heard complaints about Valravn's restraints taking away from the airtime, but I've heard almost nothing about Gatekeeper's restraints being bad. Besides that, the winged seating concept looks to make you feel very vulnerable, especially when sitting on the outside. I have a feeling this vulnerability will make me scream like a little child going through the keyholes, which look to make that inversion the best element on this ride. The way Gatekeeper rotates around the track looks to give actual airtime as your seat is being pulled away from you. All these new experiences for me on this ride is why it's my most anticipated B&M at Cedar Point. Kicking off my top 5 is Marugani at Lost Island. For me, the main draw is that launch. It may not be a fast launch, but it does look to accelerate pretty fast. This will be my first time experiencing a hydraulic launch on a roller coaster, so I have a feeling that no matter how much I brace myself, I will still be surprised by how it feels. Of course, the rest of the ride isn't slacking either. The mini top hat at the start seems to give high lateral doses, pinning you to one side and then immediately to the other. That loop will definitely pull strong positives, pulling up and leveling out, and then great hang time at the top. I'm particularly looking forward to the hang time on that inline twist. The reason I rank it so high on this list is because of how it uses the phrase, small but mighty. At the number 4 spot is Orion at Kings Island. Up until this point, every roller coaster on this list is about the height of Wild Thing or shorter. Not this ride. It's mostly about the height and speed. Besides that, the first drop looks amazing, keeping you out of your seat until you absolutely need to level out. I'm also curious as to how those new for B&M elements like that wave turn and the reverse treble clef feel. The theme on this ride, trying to save the planet by going into space, fits perfectly with the dark blue aesthetic of the track. I think this will be the most themed roller coaster on this trip. I will definitely try to make this my 60th roller coaster. Taking the bronze medal is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. Most of my reasons for placing it so high are the same reasons as Orion. You get a great sense of speed, and the magnitude of the airtime is something anyone looks forward to. The reason I place Millie above Orion is because most people say that this ride is a little bit better. It also seems to pack in more positives going through those overbanks. The setting going up that lift hill right next to Lake Erie and possibly getting the best view of the park will likely magnetize me to Marathon Millie. This will definitely be one of my favorites from this trip. Number 2 may be a surprise, but it's Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. This is an RMC Hyper Hybrid, what more can I say? In all seriousness, this ride looks to have fantastic pacing and speed while delivering possibly the best airtime in the park. Not to mention, this ride has the most airtime on any roller coaster. The top hat and outer bank will definitely be 2 of my favorite elements on any coaster. This ride isn't solely relying on airtime though. Those inversions look so fast and whippy, they'll keep you hyped for whatever is next and break up the monotony of this ride if it was just airtime hill after airtime hill. The ending of this ride may even rival that of the one on Magnum at the same park. The first drop looks to be the better version of Valraven's first drop. They're both vertical drops at hyper heights. Even for this ride not being my most anticipated credit this year, I still think it will be the best roller coaster I ride this year, and will be the only one to rival Velocicoaster for my number one spot. And best of all, this will be my very first RMC coaster. You knew what my most anticipated credit would be once you saw my second most anticipated credit, and that is Top Thrill 2 at Cedar Point. Everything about this ride will be new to me. That first launch alone is just as fast as the fastest roller coaster I've ever been on. While you don't seem to get many positives going up the top hat for the first time, it does look to pull lots of them on the backward spike and the second time going up the top hat. Many say the launch will feel nothing like the old Dragster or King Dakar, but I've never been on either of those rides, so I can't do a proper comparison. I'm sure I would have been a little disappointed. There are definitely some pros that can't be overlooked though. Going that fast in general is exciting enough, at least for me. That backward spike at 420 feet while facing straight down will for sure freak me out. I've only been on one coaster with a backward spike, and that still freaked me out while only being less than half the height of this ride. Let's not forget that 420-foot top hat. That looks to give a quick but strong pop of ejector airtime cresting the top, and it must be even crazier getting yanked down in the back row and then immediately getting whipped into a vertical 270-degree roll. I will 100% try to get a ride in both the front and the back. If I can't, I'll just go for the front because of that incredible sense of speed. Again, I'm definitely more excited for this ride than someone who has been on Dragster, because I still think it'll live up to the legend created by its predecessor. That'll conclude it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I think this video was better than my last voice recorded one. I tried a lot harder when it came to writing this script, with it almost being as long as my last one. Before I sign off, I will say that it is a possibility that I do not get to visit Michigan's Adventure or Kings Island, so this list may be obsolete in a few months when this trip is officially planned. Okay, pause. Before I continue with the outro, I just received information that would be important to this list. I was told that we would not be visiting either of the parks I just mentioned, but instead we would be visiting Six Flags Great America. Even without Kings Island or Michigan's Adventure, there is a slight possibility for me to visit the big three parks in Missouri, so that would mean a lot more credits than the original plan for this year. There are a couple parks I have not mentioned, but now I've counted a total of 69 new credits I could get this year instead of the original 48. I'll get a lot more detailed about it in my next voice recorded video. Anyways, I'll be heading out now. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.